The morning had started like any other planned weekend escape, with the excitement of visiting the small islands off the coast. The group chat was buzzing with jokes and photos as we boarded the boat, the sun warm on our skin. I had barely noticed my neighbor among the group. We had lived next door for years but exchanged only quick greetings. He was always polite, reserved, and a little mysterious, someone I never thought I'd speak to beyond casual small talk. But as the boat cut through the waves, a sudden shift in the wind and an ominous darkening of the horizon changed everything. The storm came faster than any of us expected. Heavy rain blurred the view, and the waves began to toss the boat violently. Shouts from the captain and panicked cries from passengers mixed with the sound of crashing water. I clung to the railing as we were urged to put on life vests. In the confusion, a sudden swell tipped the boat sharply, and I found myself separated from the others. My neighbor's hand gripped my arm as we stumbled onto a small inflatable tied to the side. The rope snapped, and before I understood what was happening, the current pulled us away from the main boat. Hours later, when the sky finally cleared, we found ourselves drifting toward a small, untouched island. No houses, no sign of people, just palm trees, rocks, and the sound of waves breaking against the shore. We dragged the raft onto the sand, both breathless and unsure of what to say. There was no phone signal, no visible boats in sight. The reality of being stranded began to sink in. We tried shouting, scanning the horizon, anything to feel less helpless, but all we got in return was the echo of the sea. The hours passed in awkward silence, interrupted only by short, practical exchanges about finding shade and drinking water. He had a calmness that contrasted sharply with my rising anxiety. While I checked my phone repeatedly, hoping for a single bar of signal, he was already gathering dry wood, talking about the importance of making a fire. His focus annoyed me at first, but as the sun began to set, I realized he was right. Practical tasks kept panic at bay. As night fell, the wind picked up, and the temperature dropped sharply. I shivered under my damp clothes, teeth chattering. He looked at me for a long moment before saying in a matter-of-fact tone that we should stay close for warmth, at least until morning. I hesitated, feeling the strange intimacy of the suggestion, but practicality won over awkwardness. We sat back to back under the crude shelter he had made from branches and leaves, listening to the waves in the darkness. Somewhere between exhaustion and the distant hope of rescue, I caught myself wondering if this stranger I had known for years without knowing at all might not feel so much like a stranger anymore. The first light of morning broke with the sound of gulls overhead. My body ached from sleeping on the uneven ground, but the warmth from the night before had kept the chill away. He was already up, checking the surroundings with a steady, unhurried gaze. There was no sign of a rescue boat, and the empty horizon made the situation feel heavier. Without wasting time, we discussed a plan. He suggested dividing tasks. He would search the shore for anything useful that might have washed up, while I tried to find fruit or coconuts inland. It was simple but necessary, a way to keep moving instead of dwelling on fear. The search was exhausting but yielded small victories. A few coconuts, some edible berries, and a piece of rope tangled in seaweed. We met back at the spot we'd chosen as our base, sharing what we had found like survivors in a story neither of us had imagined living. While we ate, the conversation began to shift. He asked about my work, my family, the places I had always wanted to see. I answered cautiously at first, but something about the quiet isolation made honesty easier. In return, he spoke about the city feeling too crowded, how routines slowly drained the color from life, and how he had always wanted to travel but never found the right time. At one point, a small shadow passed over us as clouds gathered, and the sudden drizzle made us scramble to protect the fire we had started earlier. Without a word, he pulled a broad palm leaf over my head, letting the rain hit his shoulders instead. I told him he didn't have to do that, but he just shrugged and said, "It's practical," as though kindness needed no other reason. The day passed slowly, marked by the rhythm of tending the fire and checking the shoreline for any sign of movement. The sun dipped low, and just as I began to drift into a daze, a faint shape appeared on the horizon. My heart leapt, and we scrambled to wave and shout. But the shape was too far, and within minutes, it faded back into the endless blue. The disappointment was sharp, sinking into the air between us. I could see the frustration in his eyes, though he masked it with calm. As the light faded, he sat beside me, staring at the ocean. "If we can't go back," he said quietly, almost as if speaking to himself, "maybe we'll just have to make a life here." It was half a joke, but something in his tone made it feel heavier, more deliberate. I looked at him, unsure how to respond, but the thought lingered, weaving itself into the strange mix of fear and comfort that had begun to define these days together. The next day carried a strange lightness, as if the island had stopped feeling entirely like a trap. His words from the night before kept replaying in my head, and though I told myself it was only a passing remark, part of me wondered what he truly meant. While we worked side by side gathering wood and checking the tide, our conversations drifted into territory that felt warmer, softer. We began to tease each other about who would be better at certain island jobs, imagining a life where one of us was in charge of fishing and the other in charge of cooking. He laughed easily, and I found myself smiling without realizing it. As the hours passed, the rhythm between us became effortless. He would hand me a piece of fruit without a word, or I would notice him moving something closer to me so I wouldn't have to strain. Small things, almost invisible, but each one carried a quiet meaning. The more we spoke, the more I realized how little I had truly known about him before all this. He told me about his childhood near the coast, the way he used to spend hours watching the horizon. I told him about my dream of living somewhere near the sea, far from the noise of traffic and the endless rush. At midday, he surprised me by returning from the trees with a thin string of vines woven together, crowned with small white flowers. Without ceremony, he placed it gently on my head and said, "Now you look like you belong here." It was playful, but something in the way he looked at me made my pulse quicken. I kept the crown, pretending it was just a silly keepsake, though it felt like more than that. As the sun dipped low, we sat near the fire, watching the glow paint the sand gold. I admitted, almost without thinking, that I wasn't afraid of the island anymore. What scared me now was the idea of going back and having this connection vanish into the routines of city life. He didn't answer right away, only watched the waves for a long moment before saying, "Then maybe we don't have to let it vanish." His voice was calm, but the meaning hung between us, heavy and unspoken. Later, while passing him a piece of roasted fruit, my fingers brushed his. Neither of us moved away. The contact was brief but charged, as if the silence after held more words than either of us could say aloud. That night, the island felt smaller, quieter, and I found myself wondering if rescue would feel like relief, or like the ending of something I didn't want to lose. The fifth morning began with an unfamiliar sound. An engine's low hum carried faintly over the water. We both froze, eyes meeting in sudden realization, and rushed toward the shoreline. The dark shape of a boat emerged on the horizon, growing slowly larger. Relief surged through me, but it was tangled with something else, a quiet ache I didn't fully understand until that moment. We waved frantically, using palm leaves and shouts to catch their attention. When the boat altered its course toward us, the certainty of leaving settled in, and with it came the knowledge that this chapter was about to close. As we climbed aboard, I felt the pull of the island fade behind us, the waves swallowing its outline. The crew asked questions, how we got there, how we survived, but my thoughts were elsewhere, replaying days of quiet conversations, shared meals, and the strange comfort of someone's presence when the rest of the world seemed impossibly far away. He sat across from me on the boat, hands resting on his knees, gaze fixed on the horizon. Neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was heavy with everything unspoken, as if words might somehow make what we had feel smaller. Back in the city, the noise returned quickly. Traffic, phones ringing, the familiar rush of people moving without noticing each other. Days passed, each one making the island feel more like a vivid dream. I still saw him occasionally, a polite wave from across the street, a shared nod when passing by. But the closeness we'd found out there seemed trapped between the ocean and the shore, waiting in a place neither of us could reach in the middle of our normal lives. One evening, just as the sun was slipping below the rooftops, there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, he was standing there, looking as though he'd been thinking for hours before deciding to come. For a moment he didn't speak, only met my eyes with a steady look. Then, with the faintest trace of a smile, he said, "If we cannot go back, must I marry you?" The words carried the same playful echo from the island, but now they felt real, deliberate. I laughed not because it was funny but because it felt like the only way to keep from saying yes too quickly. There was no ocean around us, no palm trees swaying, yet the same current seemed to move between us. I didn't answer with words, just stepped aside so he could come in. As the door closed, the sounds of the city faded, replaced in my mind by the rhythm of waves that had once carried us into a place where we were no longer strangers. In that moment it felt like we had brought a piece of the island back with us, and maybe that was enough.